Desperation creates its own kind of gravity. It pulls you into a reality where a grocery run feels like a covert operation, where the scent of industrial floor wax can't quite cover the metallic tang of anxiety. We are taught to look for monsters in the shadows, but we rarely ask what happens when the shadows decide to look back. In a world defined by the bruises we hide, the most terrifying moment isn't the violence we know, it's the sudden, impossible silence that comes right before the temperature drops. The fluorescent lights of Mercy Grove Market hummed their perpetual hymn, casting everything in that particular shade of tired that only a Tuesday afternoon could conjure. Thalassa pushed the cart with one hand, the other resting protectively on Elka's shoulder as they navigated the cereal aisle. The wheels squeaked. One always did, no matter which cart she chose, a metronome counting down moments she couldn't afford to waste. Elka's small fingers traced the cartoon characters on the boxes, her lips moving silently as she read each name. 5 years old and already so careful, so quiet. Too quiet for a child who should be singing, laughing, demanding the sugar-coated nonsense that other mothers complained about in the checkout line. The cold seeped through Thalassa's thin jacket. November had teeth this year, and the store's heating system fought a losing battle against the draft from the automatic doors. She'd forgotten gloves again. Her knuckles were raw, the skin around her wedding ring chapped and splitting. Not a wedding ring. An ownership ring. The distinction mattered, though she'd only recently allowed herself to name it. Mama? Elka's voice barely rose above the piped-in music, some instrumental version of a song Thalassa used to know the words to. Can we get the one with the marshmallows? The question was so small, so tentative, as if asking for sweetness required courage. Thalassa's throat tightened. She knelt beside the cart, bringing herself eye-level with her daughter. Elka's face was a mirror of her own, same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones, but where Thalassa had learned to hide, Elka still hoped. We can get whatever you want, baby. The words had barely left her lips when the temperature dropped. Not the gradual chill of the frozen foods section 3 aisles over. This was immediate, absolute, as if someone had opened a door to winter itself. Thalassa's breath misted in front of her face. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then steadied into something brighter, sharper, more present than before. Elka's hand found hers, small fingers squeezing tight. Mama, why is it so cold? Thalassa didn't answer. Couldn't, because she was watching a man round the corner of the aisle, and everything in her body was screaming contradictions. Run, stay, hide, look. He moved like water, like smoke, like something that had forgotten the rules of gravity and momentum. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his coat, expensive, tailored, utterly wrong for Mercy Grove, didn't move with his steps. It hung on him as if the air itself was holding its breath. Their eyes met. The world tilted. His eyes were the color of winter twilight, that moment between blue and black when the stars first pierce through. And they were looking at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, made her aware of her pulse in her throat, her wrists behind her knees. Recognition flared in those impossible eyes. Not the recognition of having met before, but something older, deeper, as if he'd been searching for her across centuries and had finally found what he was looking for. Mama? Elka tugged her hand. That man is staring. He was, unabashedly. His gaze moved from Thalassa to Elka, and something shifted in his expression, something protective and fierce and utterly terrifying in its certainty. Then he smiled, and it was the saddest smile Thalassa had ever seen. Forgive me, he said, his voice carrying despite the distance between them, despite the canned music and the humming lights. It was a voice that belonged in cathedrals, in throne rooms, in places where words held weight and consequence. I did not mean to intrude. British accent, old British, the kind you heard in period dramas, formal and precise. Thalassa found her voice. You're not. I mean, it's fine. Elka, braver than her mother, stepped forward. Are you lost? My mama knows where everything is. She's really good at finding things. The man's expression softened impossibly further. He took a step closer, and Thalassa noticed he made no sound. His expensive shoes, leather polished to a mirror shine, made no whisper against the linoleum. I am indeed lost, he said, directing his words to Elka, but never taking his eyes off Thalassa. But perhaps I have just been found. Before Thalassa could process the strange poetry of his words, before she could ask what he meant, or why her heart was racing like she'd run miles instead of standing still, another voice shattered the moment. Thalassa, her name, spoken like a curse. Torin. The warmth drained from her body, replaced by the familiar ice of fear. He stood at the far end of the aisle, his work boots planted wide, his flannel shirt stretched across shoulders that had once made her feel safe and now only promised pain. Torin. Her voice came out steady, small miracle. I thought you were working late. Clearly. His eyes cut to the stranger, then back to her. Who the fuck is this? The profanity made Elka flinch. Thalassa felt her daughter press against her leg, seeking shelter. The stranger didn't move, but something in the air shifted. The cold intensified. The lights brightened further, almost painful in their clarity, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Thalassa's bones ache. I am no one of consequence, merely another patron. Didn't ask you. Torin's hands curled into fists. He started down the aisle, each step deliberate, territorial. Asked my wife. I'm not. Thalassa started, then stopped. This wasn't the place. Not with Elka here, not with witnesses. But the stranger tilted his head, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, his eyes caught the fluorescent light wrong. They reflected it back, like an animal's, like something that hunted in darkness and knew the taste of fear. Your wife, he said softly, appears distressed by your presence. Torin laughed, sharp and ugly. That's real cute, buddy. Real fucking cute. Why don't you mind your own business before I make you? Torin, please. Thalassa put herself between him and Elka, muscle memory taking over. Not here. Let's just. Shut up. He was close now. Close enough that she could smell the beer on his breath, the cigarettes on his clothes. You embarrassing me. That what this is, flirting with some pretty boy while my daughter watches. His hand shot out, fingers reaching for her arm, for the bruises he'd left last week that were still healing beneath her sleeve. The stranger moved. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next, he was between them, his hand wrapped around Torin's wrist, holding it suspended in mid-air, as easily as if Torin were a child reaching for something forbidden. No, the stranger said, and the word resonated with something ancient and absolute. You will not touch her. Not now. Not ever again. Torin's face went white. He tried to pull back, muscles straining, but he might as well have been pulling against a mountain. The stranger's grip didn't waver, didn't tighten, simply held with the inevitability of gravity. What the let go of me? Torin's voice cracked, fear bleeding through the anger. Mama? Elka's whisper was terrified. The stranger's eyes found Thalassa's over Torin's shoulder. In them she saw a question, a promise, and something that looked impossibly like devotion. Do you wish to be free of him? He asked. And though his voice was gentle, it carried through the entire store, through the walls, through her chest, and into her heart. Truly free. Thalassa's breath caught. Around them, the world had gone silent. No music, no humming lights. Even the other shoppers seemed frozen, distant, as if they existed in a different reality entirely. She started. Torin's free hand reached for his belt, where she knew he kept the knife. The stranger's eyes flashed silver. Choose, he whispered. The silver in his eyes flared like twin moons, and the air between them crystallized into something sharp and absolute. Yes, Thalassa heard herself say, the word torn from somewhere deeper than thought. The stranger's mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of an oath sworn. His fingers tightened fractionally on Torin's wrist, and Torin's hand froze mid-reach, still inches from the knife at his belt. The color drained from Torin's face, leaving him the gray of old dishwater. "Look at me," the stranger commanded, and Torin's eyes snapped to his, against all visible will. "You will leave this place. You will drive home. You will pack your belongings, and you will never return to this city, to this woman, to this child. The thought of them will fade like a dream. You can't quite remember upon waking." His voice was silk over steel, each word settling into the air with the weight of carved stone. Torin's pupils dilated, then contracted, his breathing slowing to match the stranger's cadence. "You will feel no anger," the stranger continued, softer now, almost gentle. "No loss, only the certainty that you must go, that staying would be unwise." Torin's face went slack. The stranger released his wrist, and Torin's arm dropped to his side like a puppet with cut strings. For 3 heartbeats he stood there, swaying slightly. Then he turned, mechanically, and walked toward the exit. His gait was steady but empty, his eyes focused on nothing. The electronic doors slid open. Cold air rushed in. Torin walked through them and disappeared into the parking lot beyond. The world snapped back into motion. Music filtered through the speakers again, tinny and too cheerful. The fluorescent lights resumed their barely perceptible hum. An elderly woman 2 aisles over continued her conversation about grandchildren without pause, as if the last 2 minutes had simply never occurred for her. Thalassa's legs gave out. The stranger caught her before she hit the floor, one arm around her waist, the other supporting Elka, who still clung to her hip. His touch was cool through her jacket, firm but impossibly gentle, and the scent of him washed over her, rain and old libraries, and something darker, something that made her hindbrain whisper warnings even as her body relaxed into his support. "Easy," he murmured, close to her ear. "I have you. You're safe. What did you do to him?" Her voice came out hoarse. What was that? A kindness he didn't deserve. He guided her to a nearby bench, the kind stores kept for exhausted shoppers. Elka whimpered, burying her face in Thalassa's neck. "Sit. Breathe. Your daughter needs to see you calm." Thalassa sank onto the bench, her hands shaking as she stroked Elka's hair. The little girl's heart hammered against her chest, like a trapped bird. "Shh, baby. It's okay. He's gone. He's really gone." "Is he?" She looked up at the stranger, who stood before them like a guardian carved from marble. "How can you possibly know he won't come back?" "Because I told him not to." Simple. Absolute. As if his word alone could rewrite reality. And maybe it could. Because Torin was gone, and the air felt lighter, and for the first time in 3 years, the constant knot of dread in her stomach had loosened. "Who are you?" she whispered. He crouched before her, bringing himself to eye level. This close, she could see the impossible perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed to catch the light differently than human skin should. No pores, no imperfections, just smooth, cool beauty that made her chest ache. "My name is Valerius Hale," he said, "and I've been looking for you for a very long time." The words settled over her like snow, cold and quiet and transformative. "For me? Why would you—" "Not here." His gaze flicked toward the security cameras mounted in the corners, toward the shoppers beginning to glance their way with curiosity. "This place isn't safe for conversations that matter. Will you come with me? Both of you?" Every instinct screamed danger. Strange man. Impossible abilities. The way he'd controlled Torin with nothing but words and will, but beneath the fear ran something else. Something that felt like recognition, like the moment before lightning strikes when the air goes electric and alive, she asked. Somewhere protected, somewhere he can't follow, even if my suggestion wears thin. Valerius extended his hand, palm up, an offer rather than a demand. I swear on my life, on my name, on everything I am, that I mean you no harm, either of you. Elka lifted her head, studying him with the brutal honesty only children possessed. Are you magic? His mouth softened. Something like that, little one. Good magic or bad magic. That, he said quietly, depends on who you ask. Thalassa's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with numb fingers. 3 missed calls from Torin. No, 4, 5, but they'd all come before Valerius had intervened. Since then, nothing, as if Torin had simply ceased to exist. She looked at the stranger, this Valerius with his impossible eyes and his promises of safety. Every rational thought told her to refuse, to call the police, to run, but rationality had never protected her from Torin's fists. Rationality had left her trapped and terrified, and planning escapes she never had the courage to execute. This man, this stranger, had freed her in less than a minute. Okay, she heard herself say. We'll come with you. Valerius's car was exactly what she should have expected, and somehow still surprising, a black sedan that looked expensive in the way truly wealthy things do, understated and flawless. He opened the back door, waited while she buckled Elka into the seat, then opened the passenger door for her with old-fashioned courtesy that felt genuine rather than performative. The interior smelled like leather and that rain and library scent she was beginning to associate with him. The dashboard glowed with soft blue lights. As he slid into the driver's seat, she noticed his hands on the wheel, long-fingered and elegant, moving with the precision of a concert pianist. "Where are we going?" she asked as he pulled out of the parking lot. The grocery store receded in the side mirror, ordinary and mundane, as if nothing world-shattering had just occurred within its fluorescent embrace. "My home. It's about 20 minutes outside the city." He glanced at her and, in the passing streetlights, his eyes caught the glow, reflecting it back like an animal's. "You'll be safe there. Protected by more than locks and walls. Protected from what? Torin's gone. You said so yourself. Torin is the least of your concerns." His jaw tightened. "Though you don't know that yet." Ice slid down her spine. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "that your ex-partner wasn't watching you by coincidence tonight. He was following a pattern, a scent, something he couldn't consciously understand, but that drew him to you nonetheless. A scent." The word came out sharp with disbelief and rising panic. "What are you talking about?" Valerius was quiet for a long moment, the car gliding through streets that grew progressively emptier as they left the commercial district behind. Elka had fallen asleep in the back seat, her breathing soft and even, as if her body had simply surrendered to exhaustion. "You're going to think I'm insane," he finally said. "Try me. I just watched you mind control my abuser with a few sentences." His mouth quirked. "Fair point." He took a breath. Unnecessary and theatrical, she would later realize. There are things in this world that most people never see. Old things. Dangerous things. They exist in the spaces between what humans consider possible and what they consider myth. Things like you. Yes. No hesitation. No deflection. Things like me. And what are you, exactly? The car turned onto a private road, trees pressing close on either side, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the stars. In the darkness, his profile was cut from shadow and moonlight. "I think you already know," he said quietly. "Some part of you recognized it the moment you saw me, and God help her, she had. The impossible stillness. The predatory grace, the way he'd moved faster than human eyes could track. The cool touch of his skin, the silver flash in his eyes. "That's impossible," she whispered. "So is making a man forget his obsession with a handful of words." Valerius pulled up to a gate, wrought iron and elegant, that swung open at their approach without him touching anything. Yet here we are. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, and then the house rose before them, all stone and glass and architectural grace. Warm light glowed in the windows. It looked like a sanctuary. It looked like a trap. "Vampire," she said, testing the word, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her she'd watched too many movies. Instead, he parked the car, killed the engine, and turned to face her fully. "Yes," Valerius said, "I'm a vampire, and you, Thalassa Breen, are in more danger than you can possibly imagine." The house was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, full of carefully curated perfection that spoke of centuries rather than years. Hardwood floors gleamed beneath her feet. Original artwork hung on walls painted in deep, rich colors. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated the living room, flames crackling behind an ornate screen. Valerius carried Elka inside without being asked, the little girl still sleeping, her head on his shoulder. He moved through the space with the ease of long familiarity, climbing a curved staircase to the second floor. Thalassa followed, her hand trailing along the smooth banister, her mind spinning. Vampire. The word kept echoing. Vampire. He laid Elka on a bed in a room that looked like it had been prepared for a child, all soft colors and gentle lighting. A stuffed bear sat on the dresser. Children's books lined a small shelf, as if he'd known, as if he'd been waiting. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, as he pulled a blanket over Elka's sleeping form. "Longer than you'd believe." He straightened, and in the dim light of the bedroom, he looked almost human. Almost. "She'll sleep deeply tonight. No nightmares. No fear. Just rest. Another one of your tricks. A gift." He moved past her into the hallway, and she followed, pulled along by questions that multiplied faster than she could voice them. "She's been afraid for too long. Tonight at least, she can simply be a child." They descended the stairs in silence. He led her to the living room, gestured to a leather sofa positioned before the fire. She sat, and he took the chair across from her, separated by a coffee table that looked like it cost more than her car. "Ask," he said simply. "I'll answer what I can." "Why me?" The question burst out, raw and desperate. "You said you've been looking for me." "Why? I'm nobody. I'm just a woman trying to survive with her daughter. You're far more than that." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. 3 months ago, you were marked by something ancient and hungry. A rival coven, one that's been hunting for decades for someone with your particular bloodline. Her blood went cold. "My bloodline? What are you talking about?" "Your great-grandmother was a woman named Meredith Crane. She was a blood witch, one of the last of her kind. The gift diluted over generations, but it's still there, dormant in your veins. And certain vampires, the old ones, the cruel ones, they can sense it. They want it. Want it for what?" His expression darkened. "Power, your blood, freely given, could amplify their abilities tenfold, make them nearly invincible. And they're not interested in asking nicely." The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through the trees, a sound like whispers. Thalassa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing despite the warmth of the room. "So Torin," she said slowly. "He was what? Influenced by these vampires? Sent to keep tabs on me?" "Not consciously. But yes, his obsession was fed by their magic, amplified and directed. They needed someone close to you, someone who could monitor you, ensure you didn't disappear before they were ready to take you. And you?" She met his eyes, those impossible silver-flecked eyes. "What do you want from me?" "To keep you safe." Simple, direct. To make sure they never touch you or your daughter. Why would you care? You don't know me. Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. I know you better than you think. I've been watching over you for weeks, since the moment I sensed their interest. I've seen how you protect your daughter. How you smile at strangers who look sad. How you leave extra change in the charity jar, even when you're counting pennies. How you survive. Heat crept up her neck. The intimacy of being observed, of being seen, felt more vulnerable than nakedness. That's creepy, she managed. Yes, he agreed. It is. I apologize, but I needed to understand who you were before I intervened. Needed to be certain you were worth the war. This will start. War. The rival coven won't accept my protection lightly. I'm claiming you, Thalassa, publicly, as mine, under my safeguard. That's a declaration they can't ignore. The word mine resonated through her chest, possessive and protective in equal measure. She should hate it, should rage against being claimed like property. But the way he said it didn't feel like ownership. It felt like devotion. I don't understand any of this, she whispered. Yesterday I was worried about making rent. Today I'm apparently witch-blooded and being hunted by vampires. I know. He rose, moved to the fireplace, his silhouette backlit by flames. And I'm sorry. You deserved a normal life, a safe life. But fate, or genetics, or simple bad luck has made that impossible. She stood too, unable to sit still any longer, crossed to where he stood. This close, she could see the inhuman stillness of him, the way he didn't breathe unless he chose to, the absolute control he maintained over every micro-expression. Prove it, she said. He turned to her. Prove what? That you're what you say you are. Show me. For a long moment he just looked at her, and she saw conflict war across his features. Then, slowly, deliberately, he smiled. His lips pulled back, and his canines elongated, sliding down into fangs that caught the firelight, sharp and lethal, and undeniably real. Every instinct screamed to run. But she held her ground, held his gaze, watched as his eyes bled from grey to pure silver, glowing with their own internal light. I am a monster, Valerius said, his voice rougher now, layered with something inhuman. I have lived for 900 years. I have killed. I have fed on human blood. I am everything your nightmares warn you about. He stepped closer, and she felt the cool air that surrounded him, the absence of human warmth. But I am also a monster who chooses to be more than my nature demands, who protects instead of praise, who has spent centuries trying to atone for the creature I was when I was young, and newly turned, and thought myself a god. His fangs retracted. His eyes faded back to grey. He looked human again, beautiful and terrible, and impossibly sad. So yes, Thalassa, I'm a vampire, and I'm asking you to trust me anyway. She should run, should grab Elka and flee into the night. But her feet stayed rooted, and her hand, moving of its own volition, reached up to touch his face. His skin was cool silk under her palm, and he closed his eyes at the contact, a shudder running through him. I'm insane, she breathed. Probably, he agreed, but I believe you. His eyes opened, and the vulnerability in them stole her breath. Why? He asked. Because you saved us. Because you could have taken what you wanted by force, and instead you asked. Because the lights went out. Every lamp, every glow, even the fire snuffed out in an instant. Darkness crashed down like a physical weight. Valerius's hand found hers in the blackness, his grip iron strong. They're here, he said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of battle. Stay behind me. No matter what you see, stay behind me. The front door exploded inward, and through the splintered wood, figures poured in, pale and fast and hungry. Thalassa saw Valerius's eyes flash silver in the darkness. Then the screaming started. The screaming wasn't hers. It came from the pale figures that had crashed through the doorway, a sound like wind through broken glass. Valerius moved, and the word moved was inadequate. He was a blur of lethal grace, his body a weapon honed by 9 centuries of survival. The first attacker never reached the ground. Valerius caught him mid-leap, twisted, and there was a sound like a tree branch snapping. Thalassa stumbled backward, her spine hitting the wall. Her hand found the doorframe to Elka's room, and she pressed herself against it, a living barrier between the chaos and her sleeping daughter. The darkness wasn't complete. Silver light pulsed from Valerius's eyes, casting strobing shadows across the walls. She counted 5 intruders. No, 6. They circled him like wolves, but their movements were wrong, too fluid, joints bending at angles that made her stomach lurch. The child, one hissed, female, her voice like oil on water. Give us the child, and we'll leave the woman intact. Valerius laughed, and the sound held no humor. You'll have to go through me first, and I promise you, Cassandra, you won't enjoy the attempt. You've grown soft protecting cattle. The female, Cassandra, lunged. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a massacre dressed in terrible beauty. Valerius caught Cassandra by the throat, slammed her into the floor with enough force to crack the hardwood, then spun to intercept 2 more attackers simultaneously. His hand punched through one's chest. Thalassa heard ribs splinter, while his other arm swept the second into the wall hard enough to leave a body-shaped dent in the plaster. The smell hit her then, copper and ozone and something else, something ancient and wrong. Blood, but not human blood. It pooled black in the silver light, viscous and gleaming. Valerius! She didn't know why she shouted his name. Warning? Fear? He glanced back for a fraction of a second, and that's when she saw it. The 7th figure, smaller than the others, creeping along the ceiling like a spider, heading straight for Elka's door. Straight for her. Time crystallized. The creature dropped, fangs bared, claws extended. Thalassa grabbed the only weapon within reach, a heavy brass candlestick from the hall table, and swung with every ounce of terror-fueled strength in her body. The impact jarred up her arms. The creature shrieked and twisted mid-air, landing in a crouch between her and the door. Up close, she could see it had once been a boy, maybe 16, with dark curls and eyes that held nothing human. Brave little cattle, he hissed, blood trickling from his split lip where she'd struck him. I'm going to enjoy. Valerius materialized behind him. One hand gripped the boy's skull, the other his jaw. He wrenched in opposite directions, and the sound was like tearing wet fabric. The body crumpled. Valerius stepped over it, his eyes still blazing silver, and positioned himself directly in front of Thalassa. His back was to her, broad and solid, and splattered with black blood. She could see his shoulders heaving, could hear the ragged edge to his breathing. Stay there, he commanded, and his voice carried layers of inhuman resonance. Don't move, don't speak. The remaining attackers had regrouped. 4 left, including Cassandra, who was pulling herself upright with jerky movements, her neck bent at an unnatural angle that was slowly, impossibly, straightening itself. You can't protect them forever, Cassandra said, her voice a gurgle. We are patient. We will wait. And eventually, you'll slip, and we'll take what's ours. Nothing here is yours. Valerius's hands flexed, and Thalassa saw his fingernails had lengthened into claws, black and wickedly curved. This is my territory, my city, and they are under my protection. You want them? You'll have to kill me first. That, Cassandra smiled, revealing too many teeth, can be arranged. They came at him together, a coordinated assault that spoke of centuries of hunting as a pack. But Valerius was older, faster, and fighting with something they weren't: desperation. Not for himself, for the woman and child behind him. Thalassa watched him tear through them with clinical efficiency. There was no rage in his movements, no loss of control. Each strike was precise, calculated, lethal. When Cassandra tried to flank him, he caught her arm and used her momentum to throw her through the window. Glass exploded outward, and her scream doppeled away into the night. The last two attackers broke and ran. Valerius let them go. Silence crashed down, broken only by his harsh breathing and the distant wail of car alarms triggered by the violence. He stood in the center of the destroyed living room, surrounded by bodies that were already beginning to decay into ash, his chest heaving, his hands still clawed and dripping. Slowly, so slowly, he turned to face her. The silver was fading from his eyes, bleeding back to gray. His fangs retracted with a soft click. The claws receded, but he didn't move closer. He stayed where he was, 5 feet of devastated floor between them, and the look on his face was pure anguish. "Now you know," he said quietly. "Now you've seen what I really am." Thalassa's legs were shaking. Her hands trembled around the candlestick she still gripped. She should be terrified, should be screaming, should grab Elka and run and never look back. But all she could see was how he'd positioned himself between her and danger, how he'd glanced back to check on her even in the middle of battle, how he'd let the last two escape rather than pursue them and leave her undefended. "You saved us," she whispered. "I slaughtered them. They would have killed Elka. I am a killer, Thalassa. I have been for 900 years. Tonight was not an aberration. It's what I am." She set down the candlestick. Her hands were steadier now. "You're also the man who reads bedtime stories to my daughter, who asks permission before entering my space, who looks at me like I'm something precious, instead of something to be used. That doesn't erase. I'm not asking you to be human." She took a step forward, glass crunching under her feet. "I'm asking you to keep being exactly what you are. A monster who chooses to be more." His breath caught. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Another step. Torin was human, and he was the real monster. "You're a vampire, and you're the first person who's made me feel safe in 5 years. Thalassa, I choose you." The words came out fierce, certain. "I choose this. I choose us." He closed the distance between them in a blur and caught her face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle, despite the violence still coating his skin. "You're insane," he breathed. "You said that already. I'll say it as many times as it takes for you to understand what you're accepting. I can't give you normal. I can't give you daylight picnics or aging together or any of the things you deserve. I can only give you shadows and secrets and a love that will outlast empires." She reached up to cover his hands with hers. His skin was already warming under her touch, drawing heat from her pulse. "Then give me that." He kissed her, and it was nothing like before. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like copper and promises. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I will protect you," he whispered against her lips, "until the stars burn out, until the oceans dry, until there's nothing left but dust and memory. You and Elka. I swear it on every life I've taken, every year I've lived. You're mine now, and I am yours, and nothing in this world or any other will change that." "I know," she said simply. Behind them, Elka's door creaked open. "Mama, why is there glass everywhere?" Thalassa turned, putting herself between her daughter and the carnage, but Valerius was faster. With a gesture, shadows poured from the corners of the room, thick and tangible, obscuring the ash and blood and broken bodies. When they cleared, the room looked merely ransacked, not like a battlefield. Just an accident, little one," Valerius said gently. "Nothing to worry about. Shall I make you hot chocolate while your mama cleans up?" Elka rubbed her eyes and nodded, already half asleep again. Valerius scooped her up, and she curled against his chest with the easy trust of a child who knew she was safe. Over Elka's head, his eyes met Thalassa's. In them, she saw centuries of loneliness finally ending. She saw forever, dark and beautiful, and hers. She smiled. The shadows in the room wrapped around them like a blessing, and somewhere in the distance, the sun prepared to rise on a world that would never know what had happened here tonight. But Thalassa knew. She had chosen the darkness, and the darkness had chosen her back. And for the first time in 5 years, she was home.